When you hear about ancient texts, your mind probably jumps to dusty scrolls, maybe some cryptic prophecies, right? But what if I told you that one of the oldest books on the planet, the I Ching, the Book of Changes, is actually a killer playbook for our problems, right here, right now? Today, we're going to dive into one of its most powerful and honestly most counterintuitive lessons. Think about it. We're always told to just push forward, grind harder, never give up, right? It's drilled into us. Well, this ancient wisdom, it kind of throws a wrench in all that. It asks us to think about something crazy. What if sometimes the absolute smartest, most strategic, and even the bravest thing you can do is to take a step back? Okay, so the big idea we're talking about today comes from hexagram 7 of the I Ching, which is called the army. The line goes, "The army camps on the left, no blame." Now, what on earth does that mean? Well, to put it simply, it's about knowing when you're outmatched. You're in a weak spot, you don't have backup, and you're up against something huge. The I Ching says, hey, in that situation, the only logical move is to pull back to a safe place. And listen, this isn't about surrendering, not at all. It's about being smart enough to regroup so you can come back and actually win. So, let's talk about Dunkirk, because if you want to see this principle play out on a massive, world-changing scale, this is it. We're talking about a moment of pure desperation during World War II that, believe it or not, ended up changing the entire course of the war. And just try to wrap your head around the scale of this crisis. You've got almost 400,000 Allied soldiers completely trapped on the beaches in France. They are totally surrounded by the German army, and it looks like total annihilation is just a matter of time. Pushing forward? No way. Holding their ground? That's a death sentence. The only option, the only thing left to do, was retreat. And, afterwards, Churchill didn't try to spin this. He was brutally honest about it. He stood up and told everyone, look, let's not pretend this is a victory. He called it what it was, a colossal military disaster, an evacuation, a retreat. But, and this is the crucial part, this is the whole point, while it wasn't a victory in that moment, that evacuation, that massive strategic retreat, was the one thing that made the final victory possible. It literally saved the British Army. These were the soldiers who, years later, would form the backbone of the D-Day invasion and help liberate Europe. Without that retreat, none of it happens. So if we look at Dunkirk through the lens of the I Ching, it's fascinating. You have the army hexagram, which is all about that initial decision. We have to retreat to survive. Then you get obstruction, which perfectly describes the problem they hit. The big military ships couldn't get close to the shore. And the wisdom there led to the solution. This incredible flotilla of thousands of little civilian boats. And finally, you have deliverance, which reflects how Churchill's bold, super risky decision was ultimately seen for what it was, an act that delivered them from total disaster. All right, so this isn't just about massive wars and historical events. This same wisdom applies to our own lives, our own personal battles. Let's shift gears and look at the story of a young student in Taiwan who was facing his own version of an impossible situation. So here's this really bright kid, officially identified as gifted. He had his whole heart set on getting into one of the top-tier academic high schools. And then the exam results came back. He missed the cutoff. And for him, for his family, it just felt like a total, crushing defeat. So now they're at a crossroads. The conventional thing to do, just push for another academic school, a lower-ranked one, and just deal with it. But instead, they chose the wise path. They made a strategic retreat. Instead of banging his head against a wall, he pivoted. He enrolled in an amazing vocational school to specialize in automotive technology, something he could absolutely crush. And get this, the result? This so-called retreat was actually a brilliant flanking maneuver. He took this completely different path, and because of it, he stood out. He became a star in his field and ended up getting into his dream university, National Taiwan Normal, through a new automotive program they had. See? He didn't fail. He just found a much smarter way to win. Okay, so we've seen what happens when this wisdom works. It's powerful. But what happens when people ignore it? For that, we've got to look at a recent cautionary tale from the world of politics. And just to be clear, we're staying totally neutral here. We're only looking at the strategy, or lack thereof. So the setup was this. In late 2023, a few opposition parties in Taiwan decided to try and team up. The idea was to create one single, unified ticket for the presidential election. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and if they pulled it off, the reward would have been huge. But the whole thing just fell apart and fast. What started with hope quickly turned into total confusion. It all came to a head in this final televised meeting that just became, well, a public train wreck of disagreement. In about 10 days, the whole thing was dead. The chance for unity? Poof, gone. And one of the biggest sticking points, and you're not going to believe this, was where to meet. One side dug their heels in saying, nope, we have to meet at the former president's office. It's about principle. We have to end it where it all began. Meanwhile, the other side was like, no way. We'll find a public place, like the Grand Hyatt, and we'll wait for you there. So you had this public standoff over something as simple as logistics, but it really symbolized a much deeper problem. Nobody was willing to compromise. Nobody would make even a tiny retreat from their position. And that was the ball game. In the end, nobody was willing to camp on the left, as the I Ching would say. No one would make that one small, strategic concession, even for the sake of the much bigger prize. So what was the result? Not a win for anybody. It was a total failure for everyone involved. And that coalition they dreamed of, it just never happened. All right, let's pull all this together. We've looked at a world war, a student's future, and a high-stakes political deal. I mean, 3 totally different worlds, right? But they're all connected by the exact same timeless principle. So what does a strategic retreat actually look like? Well, at Dunkirk, it was about pure survival, preserving an army to fight again. For that student, it was a brilliant redirection, a new path to success. And in that political mess, the lack of a retreat, the inability to concede, led directly to a breakdown for everybody. The real wisdom is figuring out which situation you're in, and then having the guts to make the right move. And that's really the key here. The I Ching isn't some crystal ball that tells you the future. Think of it more like a toolkit for situational awareness. It gives you a language, a way to look at where you are right now, understand all the pieces on the board, and figure out the absolute smartest move you can make in this moment. So I'll just leave you with this question to chew on. Take a look at your own life right now. Your job, your relationships, your big goals. Is there a battle you're fighting head on where you just keep hitting a brick wall? Is there a place where maybe, just maybe, a strategic retreat, a temporary pivot, could actually be the single smartest move you'll ever make?